I just received new tools in the mail, and I'd like to share my research concerning them with other knitters. These are aftermarket needle selectors made by someone who sells on Etsy. I bought 5mm and 7mm because that's what I needed. 5mm combs will fit my Passip, Superba, and quite a few European machines, and I'll cover them in another video. The 7mm combs will fit my Brother KX350 and my Artisan machine, and those are the ones we'll try out today. Here's a view of the back of the combs. In a minute, I will be mentioning little dips in the back of each tooth on the comb. This is a close look at what I'm talking about. It's a feature not present on all stitch selector combs. Our real concern is, of course, how well do they perform while we're knitting? And the best way to find out is to knit something. So we'll knit a little hat. I obtained these from Black Fox CNC on Etsy. Got super fast service, carefully packaged, and I'm totally pleased. But let's see how they knit. We'll test by knitting this. It's 15 inches in circumference. This is a baby-sized hat. And we'll use the new combs to select for the color work. For the sample, I'm using 2 different colors of Mary Lou's Liberty Plus, getting 4.2 stitches, 7 rows per inch, using stitch size 5 on the dial of my KX350. Anything really close to that will work, and I happen to know that both Karen Simply Soft and Tam Nordic come very, very close in performance. Gauges taken in stockinette, of course. Before actually starting to knit, I fooled around with the combs for a minute and found out a pleasant and joyful surprise. The back of them, you see that little dimple each tooth has? It makes selection nearly foolproof. They don't have the little point that sticks down from one of the prongs to guide you by sliding into the needle channel. But when you line those dips in the teeth up with the needles, you can't possibly misselect. So I really like this feature. Begin the hat by E-wrapping 64 needles. I generally knit the first row back from the hold position to prevent any number of problems and get the comb right on the work. The first row before we hung the comb was row 1 of 12. So go ahead and knit 2, 3, 4 and through row 12. Now use the nifty new needle selector. I'm just using the 1x1 selector to bring every other needle forward all the way across the work. Make sure the carriage is set to hold the stitches that are forward. On this machine, that's the lever pushed back. Still with the main color in the feeder, knit 2 rows. Now use the flat part of the comb to push the needles that were all the way forward to upper working position. We want them to knit next row, and use the selecting notches on the comb to bring the other set of needles to hold position. They've already had their turn for these 2 rows, and we need to alternate and knit on the other set. So I'm setting them up to make certain they'll knit across smoothly and changing to the other color of yarn. And with it, we will also knit 2 rows. And we have knitted 4 passes with the carriage, but we've only completed 2 rows because half of the stitches knitted each time. We're going to repeat the same process in the same manner, alternating the sets of needles that are in use, alternating the colors. It's time for 2 rows of blue. Then we will change the sets of needles involved and knit 2 rows of pink. Now you want to make sure that you keep alternating the needles in use, but you do not have to keep alternating the colors. At any point, you can change which needles get which colors. I did change up one time, and that resulted in the little design at the edge not being completely vertical stripes. Instead, they're offset. For this hat brim, we want 8 rows of 2-color work. That will be 16 passes with the carriage, 8 of each color. Nobody will really know if you got the exact design you had in mind, Just make sure that you do keep alternating which stitches knit. After 16 passes of the carriage, 8 in each color, set for normal stockinette, return to the main color and knit 2 plain rows. The color work and the selection using these needle combs is done for this project. Hang the E-wraps on the working needles, and for this kind of hat, I find you have a choice. You may use every E-wrap. That's not a problem if you want to, but every other one is adequate to get a nice closure. So as to these new needle selector combs, my opinion is they are excellent. They worked really, really well, and if that's all you wanted to see, you're done. They're a good thing, and I do recommend them. If you want to finish a hat with me, knit 24 plain rows in the main color. I'm going to finish this hat with what I refer to as a cheater's crown. It's a cheater's crown in that it does have some shaping, but we're not going to move needles together, stitches together across the needles, which can be tedious. We're going to do something a little less perfect, but it works, and it's much, much infinitely easier. Begin on this row by transferring every 4th stitch to the next needle over and place the empties out of work. Now we will knit 6 rows, and every row after the first one, turn down the stitch dial 1 notch. So the stitches are getting smaller and smaller. My turn downs are going on off camera, but you know how to do that. After the 6th row, we will take the center stitch from every group of 3 and transfer it to the next needle over. And again, every needle that gets emptied gets placed out of work. There are only 2 more rows in the entire hat. Knit 1 of them and then turn down the stitch dial as far as it will go to knit the final row. And by that, I mean as far as it will go and knit nicely. Then snip the yarn, leaving a good long tail. Thread the tail into a yarn needle. Use the yarn needle to pick up each stitch one by one in a row and thread those stitches onto the yarn tail. The hat now needs just a little bit of hand finishing. Pull it lengthwise and give special attention to pulling the hem lengthwise, or even slide something into the hem to pull downwards. I use a knitting needle lots of times because that will improve its looks greatly. Pull the crown together tightly and pull and manipulate where we did that cheater's crown, and the stitches will start to even out and flow into each other and make it look much nicer. Knot the gathering in securely at the top, and then use the remainder of the yarn tail to seam the edges of the hat together. Generally, I use mattress stitch for this seam, and that's what you see me doing here. I mattress stitch next to the edge column of stitches, but other choices are acceptable. Back stitch will work. Using a longer tail and chain stitching with your latch tool can work. Hanging it back on the machine and seaming that way can work. The little hat is finished, and the back of the color work is hidden inside of the hem. There's the cheater's crown finished. Although this resembles Fair Isle, it's actually 2-color tuck. The same combs can certainly be used for Fair Isle, and we just use different settings on the knitting machine. So we will look at that in future videos. That's fun too. But this is 2-color tuck. I chose it for this hat brim because it is, after all, for a baby, and the floats in real Fair Isle tend to make it stiffer and tighter. This will remain stretchier and easier to put on. I have oodles of other hat patterns available for you on my website. I will put a link to the hat page in the program notes, and also a link to the Etsy store where you can buy these combs if you need them.